Hello and welcome to my Fury Warrior Guide for Battle for Azeroth. So, before we get going, a PSA. I am by no means a professional warrior player. I am not a cutting edge mythic raiding loon. I am just someone that really enjoys playing the game, and I am finding Fury Warrior extremely fun to play in this expansion. Mainly because it feels quick and you're not having to wait for your global cooldowns. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So first things first, let's talk about talents. Now the good thing is with the Fury Warrior is you have a number of talents you can pick and choose dependent on what you just find most enjoyable and what situation you're in as well. So if you're PvP, if you're raiding, or if you're pushing keys in Mythic Plus, there are certain talents which will work best for you. So here's my current setup. And the reason why I'm playing this is because I do a bit of everything, and I'm finding this the most fun to play. So first of all, in row 15, we have War Machine. Your auto attacks generate 10% more rage, and killing an enemy instantly generates 10 rage and increases your movement speed by 30% for 8 seconds. Or you've got Fresh Meat. It's a passive talent, which means your Bloodthirst has a 15% increased chance to trigger Enrage and heals for 20% more. And finally, the one I'm using is Endless Rage, which is another passive talent, and it gives you 6 rage whenever you enrage. And with this talent build, you are looking for maximum uptime when on enrage, so this is why I've gone with that one. The next one, you've really got 2 talents that you can pick from, the first being Double Time. It increases the maximum number of charges on charge by 1, and it reduces your cooldown by 3 seconds. In Mythic Plus, I would be running with this one. An extra charge is great, and obviously with the shorter cooldown is even better. But because I am playing with War Mode on, as you can see, and I like doing some battlegrounds, I've gone with Stormbolt. Those pesky ranged casters cannot get away from you when you have a Stormbolt. It's where you throw your weapon at an enemy, you cause some physical damage, and you stun them. So with a mixture of your Heroic Leap, your Charge, and Stormbolt means you can close that gap even quicker. On to row 45, you've got Inner Rage. Raging Blows cooldown is reduced by 1 second, and damage is increased by 20%. You've also got Furious Slash. Again, this is a talent you can run with if you want. Aggressively strike with your offhand weapon for 2000 physical damage and increases your haste by 2% for 15 seconds, and this does stack up to 3 times. So you do want to keep this going or have as much uptime with Furious Slash as possible. But I've chosen to go with Sudden Death, which is a passive. It's your attacks have a chance to reset the cooldown of Execute and make it usable on any target regardless of their health. So whenever you're doing Mythic Plus, you've got a load of mobs in front of you, you can just get random procs of Execute, and when you are enraged, it does hit like a truck. On row 60, Furious Charge. Charge also increases the healing from your next Bloodthirst by 250%. So if you do need extra healing, this is a talent that you can go with. Bounding Stride reduces the cooldown on Heroic Leap by 15 seconds, and Heroic Leap now also increases your run speed by 70% for 3 seconds. Just great for improving speed, but I've never gone with this talent. I am running Warpaint though, which is a passive talent, and you take 10% reduced damage while your Enrage is active. So given my Enrage is up most of the time, it does mean that I'm pretty much just taking 10% reduced damage at all times. This is why I've gone with this one. And row 75, Carnage. It's another passive talent, and it makes your Rampage cost 10 less rage, and it deals 15% increased damage. Again, Carnage, you want to be hitting it every time it comes off cooldown, so you're going to be getting an extra 15% damage. Massacre. Execute is now usable on targets below 35% health. This just allows you to spam your Execute ability when the target's low on health. Again, this can be good to use in Mythics, but Carnage for me is the instant pick every single time. Frothing Berserker, another passive. Rampage now costs 95 rage, and it increases your damage done by 10% and haste for 5% for 6 seconds. Row 90, Meat Cleaver. Another passive where Whirlwind has a 10% chance to enrage you and generates an additional 1 rage per target hit, up to 3 additional. The next 2 talents you can pick and choose. I believe the last time I looked on Raider.io, Dragon Roar was the talent of choice for most people pushing the higher keys. It is a instant use ability. It means you roar explosively and you deal physical damage to all enemies within 12 yards, and you reduce their movement speed by 50% for 6 seconds. This is good when you are charging straight into mobs, you're enraged, and you let loose with the Dragon Roar and slow those mobs down, and the increased damage is great. However, I'm playing with Bladestorm purely because there's nothing more enjoyable than just turning into a whirlwind of giant axes, mashing up mobs. Again, one of the reasons why I'm playing Warrior, just because I'm finding it fun, just hitting things with big swords and maces. Bladestorm turns you into an unstoppable storm of destructive force, apparently. Striking all targets within 8 yards with both weapons for 20,000 physical damage over 3.5 seconds. It also means that you are immune to movement impairing and loss of control effects, but you can use defensive abilities and avoid attacks. So you can use this if you've been rooted, and it will free you. But again, it's just really, really fun to use. Again, the last talents are 3 that you can pick and choose from dependent on the situation you're playing. Reckless Abandon generates 100 rage and it lasts 4 seconds longer. It makes your recklessness, lasts for 4 seconds longer. I'll come on to recklessness in a bit, but this is something that's very, very useful for giving you extra damage. Anger Management, every 20 rage you spend reduces the remaining cooldown on recklessness by 1 second. This is great. Again, it does allow you to keep on pressing that recklessness GCD every time it comes down. And finally, the one that I'm running with is Siege Breaker. Break the enemy's defenses, dealing some physical damage, and it increases your damage done to the target by 15% for 10 seconds. Again, because I do a bit of World PvP and some Battlegrounds, I find that this is quite good. Allows you to increase your damage on the people that you're smashing in the face. Okay, so on to stats. With Warrior and Fury Warrior in particular, you are going to prioritize strength, as you would expect. It's found on most gear that you pick up in dungeons, raids, PvP, Battlegrounds, and so on. And all this does is it increases your attack power. So more strength is more damage going down. Your second stat priority is haste. This makes your global cooldown quicker. It makes your auto attacks quicker. It just compresses the rotation essentially. And this is one of the reasons why I'm finding Warrior so fun to play, is it is quite a spammy class. Instead of waiting for things to come down off the global cooldown, you generally do have something to hit at all times, and if it's not necessarily in the right order, that's okay too. It also speeds up the amount of damage done by your Bladestorm ability, for instance, and your Execute, your Raging Blow, and so on. You'll find that the cooldown is a lot quicker as your haste goes up. Next, you're going to want to concentrate on your Mastery, and this increases your damage done while you're enraged. Like I said earlier on, you are going to find that you're enraged pretty much all of the time. So Mastery is your third stat. Fourth, you're going to want to focus on Versatility. Increases the damage and healing done, and decreases damage taken. And then finally, Crit. That is your least prioritized stat, which just gives you an additional chance to double the damage that's coming in. Okay then, so onto your abilities. You have got Battle Shout, which is your instant cast, and it increases the attack power of all raid and party members within 100 yards by 10% for an hour. This is why people are going to want to bring you to a raid or dungeon, because you will increase all attack power of all of your party members. Berserker Rage. Go Berserk, removing and granting immunity to fear, sap, incapacitate effects for 6 seconds. Great in PvP, and that is on a 1 minute cooldown. My favourite, Bladestorm. Mentioned that earlier on when speaking about the talents. Bloodthirst, 4 second cooldown, and you're going to assault the target, In a bloodthirsty craze, you're going to deal some physical damage, and it restores 5% of your health. So this is the ability that you want to be using to restore some of your health. Again, great in PvP, and it's one of the main talents to be spamming when you are running low on health. Charge, the generic warrior charge. Charge to an enemy, you deal some damage and you do root it in place for 1 second, and it also generates you 20 rage. Enraged regeneration reduces the damage taken by 30%, and it increases the health that your bloodthirst regenerates by 20%. You can use this while stunned. Again, in PvP, this is something you're going to be wanting to using when you're getting low on health to getting your HP back up as quickly as possible. Execute. This is what you're going to be spamming towards the end of a raid, boss fight, or a dungeon. You attempt to finish off a wounded foe, causing some physical damage, a high amount of physical damage, and it can only be used on enemies that have less than 20% health unless you take the talent, which enables it to be used under 35%. Heroic Leap. Unless you've chosen the talent, you will only get one of these every 45 seconds, and it allows you to leap through the air towards a target location, dealing a small bit of damage within 8 yards to all enemies. Heroic Throw, it's fairly useless. It is just good for like tagging mobs and such on world quests if you're going to get there just before it dies. I always tend to chuck my axe at them just to tag the enemy. Intimidating Shout, 1.5 minute cooldown, and it causes the targeted enemy to cower in fear and up to 5 additional enemies. So when you are being laid into in PvP, there's too many mobs on a quest, you can use Intimidating Shout. It will make all enemies cower in fear to stop attacking you. Piercing Howl snares all enemies within 15 yards, reducing their movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds. In PvP, this is pretty much the first thing that I'm hitting, and it is also something that I'm continuously trying to keep up in PvP to make sure that people can't kite you, because as soon as they start kiting you, that's when you're in a world of trouble. Pummel, this is a interrupt. It's on a 15-second cooldown, and in the dungeons in BFA, you are going to be using this a lot. Interrupt those casts. Your tanks will appreciate it. Raging Blow hits the target with both weapons for some physical damage, and it has a 20% chance to instantly reset its own cooldown. If you picked the talent that allows you to go into battle trance, when this is the one that you use twice in a row. So this is generally what I do. I'll save 2 charges of it and then use it on the same enemy one after another. Just remember, if you do use it on another one, and that does include Whirlwind, which I'll talk about in just a minute, it will reset that buff, the battle trance. Rallying Cry, 3-minute cooldown, instant ability. Let's loose a Rallying Cry, granting all party or raid members within 40 yards 15% temporary and maximum health for 10 seconds. This is something, again, you can use to help your healers out with in dungeons, or just to get some extra life in PvP. If you're very close to dying, or if the group's taking a lot of damage, you can use Rallying Cry just to give your healer a bit of a hand. Rampage. This is the one that you're going to want to press every time it comes off cooldown. It enrages you and unleashes a series of 4 brutal strikes for a total of 12,600 physical damage. This is what primarily keeps your enrage up, and this is what ultimately increases your damage. Recklessness. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown instant ability where it makes you go berserk, increases all rage generation by 100%, and grants your abilities 20% increased critical strike chance for 10 seconds. Again, this is something that you want to be using frequently, increases your damage, and just generally makes you pump out more DPS. We've already spoken about Siegebreaker in the talent. We've already spoken about Stormbolt 2. You do have a taunt if you want to use it. Victory Rush strikes the target, causing some physical damage, and it heals you for 20% of your maximum health. And it is only usable 20 seconds after you kill an enemy that yields experience or honor. So essentially you need to get the killing blow, whether that's on a PvP or PvE encounter. It means that you can then use Victory Rush to heal yourself back up for 20%, which is quite a lot. Again, so if you have this active and you need to restore health, you should be hitting this straight away. Whirlwind, this is a bit of a filler, and it is also something that you'll be using a lot in AoE circumstances. Unleashes a whirlwind of steel, striking all enemies within 8 yards for some physical damage, and it causes your next 2 single targets to strike up to 4 additional targets for 50% damage. So when there are more than 1 enemies around you, whether that's in PvP or in PvE, you want to be using this just before you use your hard hitting abilities such as Execute or Siege Breaker, and it will spread the Siege Breaker debuff to all enemies that you hit. Again, you want to be using this a lot in AoE circumstances, and it is also something that you can use in a filler if you do find that you are having to wait for your global cooldowns. Mastery, Unshackle Fury, increases damage done while enraged by 19.8%. This is real key for this build. This is what makes you do even more damage, and this is why it is key to be enraged as much as possible. Titan's Grip, the thing that just makes you a Fury Warrior, it allows you to dual wield a pair of 2-handed weapons. Some people don't like this, they think it looks ridiculous. I just think it looks ace because you can just run around with 2 huge swords or axes and basically just hit people in the face with them. The one thing that I have found though is when you're playing Fury, it does mean that you have to find 2 weapons to use, which in this expansion can prove tricky. In fact, I've only just got a second weapon at 340R level, so it has taken a while. So there you go, there are all your talents. So let's look at the rotation. Okay, so onto the rotation. The rotation is fairly straightforward. What you want to do is you want to hit Rampage as soon as it becomes available. Go into Recklessness, hit Siege Breaker, Rampage again, Whirlwind, Rampage again, hit Bloodthirst, and then apply 2 stacks of Rampaging Blow. The key to this is just matching up your Rampage with your abilities, saving your Raging Blow for 2 stacks, and if you do find yourself waiting for the global cooldown, use Whirlwind as a filler. Don't forget, if you have got more than 2 enemies around you, then you want to be using your Whirlwind ability, and what that will do is it will spread your next 2 attacks up to 4 additional enemies. Okay, so it can take a short while to get used to this rotation, but once you've got it down, again, it is fairly straightforward. If you don't necessarily get it in the exact order, I found that it generally doesn't do too much to my DPS in raids or dungeons. I generally find that even at the eye level I am, which is only just over 350, I'm still generally in the top half. Fury Warriors aren't going to be pushing out top DPS. If that is something that you are focusing on, then you should probably go Arms, and even still, Arms Warriors aren't the highest DPS class at the moment. There are others which are better out there. The key things to remember is essentially try and stay enraged as often as possible and use all of your abilities such as Siege Breaker, such as Blade Storm, such as Execute, whilst you are enraged, because that is where the extra damage is going to come from. Use Recklessness during burst windows, use it when you are going to pop Bloodlust or Heroism or Time Warp, and don't forget, if you are an Orc, for instance, you've also got your Blood Fury ability that you can pop as well, and all of that does increase your damage. But ultimately, it's all about just hitting things as hard as you can and as fast as you can whilst you're enraged, and also a little bit of self-healing to help the healers out. Okay, so in terms of enchantments and consumables, you are going to be looking for haste on your rings. You can get some enchants off the auction house fairly cheap. And then finally, the flask that you are going to be looking for is Flask of the Undertow. If you do want food, the food that I'd recommend getting is swamp fish and chips. Again, this gives you haste for an hour, and it is fairly cheap on the auction house, so you don't have to keep eating from a feast every pull if you don't wish. So there you go, that was my Fury Warrior guide for Battle for Azeroth. Like I say, I'm just finding this really, really fun. I've got 4 max level characters, and this one is generally the one that I'm on the most because it's just a lot of fun hitting things with big swords. So if you like what you saw, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I'll be putting out more guides in the upcoming months over the course of Battle for Azeroth. More guides for classes, some raid guides and some encounter guides, and also some top tips that I've picked up along the way. Thanks for watching.